So this session is on evidence to inform our action, especially our policy action in terms of upstream policies to promote mental health. And Jean, I'm very humbled also to be in your presence today.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's very kind of you to say, Claire. I'm hoping that you can hear me well, and I'm going to try and share my screen now, if that's good. And so thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me to be part of this. I'm going to start my timer here. I am, as you can see from the bio, I'm an infant, child, and adolescent psychiatrist. I am an upstreamist, and I am a stirrer of the pot for children. So what I want to talk to you today, what we've been asked to talk to you in the next 8 to 10 minutes, is about what's the evidence for investing in the early years that should influence policy. So I'm going to talk to you about the brain, the biology, the dollars and cents. But you know, I want to start right off from saying that I'm talking about very little children in a kind of object way. But I want to remind us all of the beauteous teachings that we just heard from Elder Marshall and Dr. Ristoul, that paramount in all of our discussions is, as I see it, the teachings of the elder, the indigenous people. And I learned from Tom Porter, a Mohawk elder, that we need to be embracing children as the sacred ones, as the heart of the nation, and that it is our sacred responsibility to raise our children. So as I talk about operationally the brain and all of that stuff, it's important to keep that in mind. So when we talk about infant and mental health, people usually say to me, well, what do you mean infants and toddlers and preschoolers? What kind of mental health issues can they possibly have? And so what we did here in Ontario is led a review of the literature that showed that in fact the percentage of little ones who have significant mental health issues with regulation, with aggression, with anxiety, is in fact the prevalence is the same as it is for older children. But when the Mental Health Commission of Canada initially did its work, children were hardly mentioned at all, and preschool children were not mentioned, or infants not mentioned at all. So we, a number of us, including Chaya Kulkarni, Dr. Kulkarni, a wondrous advocate for children and babies, spoke last year, really are trying to put infant and early childhood mental health and well-being on the map. The fact is, children do have mental health, babies do have mental health challenges, and they do persist. But what do we mean when we talk about infant and early childhood mental health? Well, first of all, as we've heard, it really is thinking about the holistic development of children. And from a 0 to 3 definition, we identified that what kids need in order to grow healthy is the exploration of the environment, learning how to attach to others, becoming the big boss of their emotions, being able to explore and to build relationships, all in that wondrous community that we've heard described, that includes the spiritual well-being. And the graph that I show here is from our dear, dear friend, Clyde Hertzman, who passed much too early, that says, what are the areas, what are the environments that influence child development? And when we think about that, we have to be thinking about the individual, the characteristics of each of those little ones who have the spirit within. And what they bring influences their family, influences whoever that family is. And so we need, as we're thinking about policy, to be thinking about not only the intimate, what happens, how are we supporting family and whatever variation that is, but then outside of the family, how are the children being allowed to play? How are they being encouraged to get out there, as dear Sir Ken Robinson spoke so much about the importance of play and creativity? So how does policy influence the green space, for example? Or in the region, how about childcare? How are we supporting mums and dads staying at home, looking after their little ones, or choosing to have high quality childcare? So you see that when people ask me, well, where should you spend your money? It's really very difficult to say, because there are so many of these intersecting influences. So why do we care about thinking about the littlest ones? Well, really the explosion that there has been over the past 15, 20 years in knowledge, the ability to look inside the brain in ways that are non-invasive, neuroimaging, really has taught us tremendous things. And that is that the baby's brain, when they are born, is in formation, if you like. All of the neurons, the brain cells, are in place as they need to be, but it really is experience that builds those connections. And so how much a baby gets picked up, gets hugged, gets read to, gets sung to, hears their beautiful indigenous language, observes the culture around them in ceremony, all of that is building the neurons connection. And as there are repeated experiences come in, those neurons connect up together. Now here's the challenge. The baby's brain doesn't say, oh, this is a good experience, I'll keep it, oh, or this is a bad one, I'm going to ignore it. Unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword. So the children who experience neglect, maltreatment, severe parental mental illness that's not supported, they actually have brains that get formed by that experience. So we used to think back in the olden days that our genes determined who we were. And I remember in my undergraduate degree looking and wondering, well, what is it? Is it nature or is it nurture? What makes us who we are? And we see that it is actually the genes are listening to the environment. I'll go deeper into that. So this is the concept of neuroplasticity. And as we realize that 90% of the brain, all of those connections are built in the first couple of years, we realize that this is a crucially important time of development. And this is the work that was first started by Chuck Nelson and modified by Fraser Mustard, bless his soul. You see that there are times when the brain is under construction and there are certain areas that are being actively constructed. The brain is saying, hit me now, I'm ready for this experience. And that many of the skills that children are going to need to do well and learn, as we're going to hear from Karen in the preschool, those building blocks are happening in the early years. So making sure that we have the kind of supports for parents that are going to give these kids, all of our children, the best experience is essential. So let's go just a little bit more deeply into this. And again, excuse me, this is the work of Clyde, Dr. Clyde Hertzman. What we now know is that experience gets under the skin. And Clyde coined this term biological embedding. And if you want to learn more about it, go to the community, the website. My dear friend Jim Mustard and his group have put together a lovely little 3-minute video, and it's one of the resources. But what we know now is that experience influences how the brain gets built. And you know, the architecture of the brain gets built by this, and it affects neural circuitry, which affects the cells, which affects actually gene function. So what we now know is that gene function is changed by parenting. So this is the work of Michael Meany, and it was very elaborate research that showed that your parents actually, in these rat studies, they actually changed the expression of the DNA. So coming back to humans, there's now evidence that's showing that when infants are picked up, when they are soothed by their parents, when you look at those children later on, and as toddlers, you see that their DNA methylation, whether the DNA has got a little tag on it that says, okay, you can hit me and I'll turn on and make more of those proteins, it's different. What are the implications? We're not 100% sure at this point in time, but certainly what we're learning is what the indigenous people have told us for so very, very long. And that is that when we care for our children, and when we care for our children and connect them, then they do well. So what are the benefits of early childhood education? Here they are. This is from the early years study. You can look at it from the economic perspective and say that, well, if we get mums into the workforce, because it's mainly mums, if we have a high quality childcare that's available for all, and excellent supports to parents in their 18 months of parental leave, then what we see is a huge list of opportunities. Dollars and cents. Jim Heckman, Nobel Prize winner, has said when you look specifically at disadvantaged communities, children who come from distressed communities, and you start at 0 to 5, you get a 13% return on investment. That's for disadvantaged. And then the early years study has said, yeah, but you know what? If you do it for all children, and this is Canadian study, you get for every dollar you invest, you get $6 back. So, you know, this is this is what we have to be thinking about, that what happens early lasts a very, very long time, that if we have policies that says, how are we looking after our children and supporting our youngest families, then we will have a Canada that thrives. So thank you very much. I'll stop there and pass on to the next one.
Thank you so much, Jean. I'm such a big fan of your work. I could listen to you all day. And Jean is, I just want to say, she's a clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster University in the Division of Child Psychiatry. And she is renowned nationally and internationally as an advocate for children's issues. So thank you so, so much, Jean, for being with us today. Next is Karen Bierman, and she's an Evan Pugh University professor, professor of psychology and human development and family studies, and director of the Child Study Center at Pennsylvania State University. So thank you so much for virtually coming across that border and joining us here in Canada today. So Karen, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That was terrific, Jean. Let me just see. I need to just share my screen here. As you'll see, it follows closely what I'm going to talk about. No, I'm going to follow right on the topics that Jean was talking about. I'm going to talk about a little bit older, the preschool to school transition period, why that is so important, and also go through some of the data on what now that we understand more about how early development is affecting the brain and the biological sort of underpinnings of social emotional development. What does that tell us about how we can organize programming in the preschool period to really maximize its upstream benefits?
So Karen,
yes.
Karen, we can see now. So we're on slide that says topics, why preschool?
Okay, perfect. Okay, if you can go to the next one. Why preschool? So Jean touched on this a little bit. We know the picture here, the graphic is a little kiddo. She's weighed, what, maybe like 2.5. And we see, you know, she's done this lovely artwork on her sister. It's adorable because we know at that age, these kiddos don't have much self-regulation. They don't have a real sense of other people. They're very impulse-driven. But we also know if we thought about that young child as a girl of 6, we'd be sort of horrified by that behavior, because by 6, we expect children to have developed a real sense of self, self-control, an understanding of other people, empathy, to care for others, and to get along with others. And that's the magic. If you flip to the next slide, that's really the magic of the huge development in social emotional skills and social emotional capacity that occurs during the preschool period. It's driven, and Jean alluded to this, by a heavy maturation of the prefrontal cortex that really regulates and controls, allows the child to inhibit their impulses and reflect and understand on the feelings that are coming from their base reaction to events and the signals they're getting from other people. If you jump to the next slide, we know that, just again, exactly as Jane talked about, the way the environment supports that development is really critical. And we know especially that conditions of adversity, children who are exposed to high levels of stress, trauma, many children living in poverty who have very high levels of adversity, that this really inhibits the biological development of the prefrontal cortex and the development of these skills that underlie compassion, empathy, capacity to get along, and also their own emotional feelings. If you jump to the next slide, we can see the impact of adversity already by the time children enter school. We can see that children coming from high levels of adversity, 20% already have clinically significant levels of behavior problems, and half are missing the level of language skills and attention control that's really going to undergird their social emotional growth as they move forward. In fact, in the next slide, this is a research study that was done looking at teacher ratings at kindergarten, at school entry, of a set of social emotional and self-regulation skills. The ability to get along, to understand emotions, to manage their emotions. And those skills rated by teachers at kindergarten were a strong predictor way out at age 25 of things like being able to graduate from high school, being able to get and keep productive employment, being able to avoid arrest. Really important landmarks of a successful life and well-being. And the reason these are so important, if you jump to the next slide, is they really are the foundation. These preschool gained social, emotional, and self-regulation skills, they become the core foundation for the ongoing layers of social emotional development that we'll see during the middle childhood and that lay the foundation for adulthood. We've known for some time, if you jump to the next slide, that high quality preschool can make a big difference. And Jean talked about some of the economic analyses. This particular slide is from the Perry Preschool study, where children had a very enriched preschool experience and then were followed. This slide, I think, captures them at age 25. They've been followed now into age 40, and the upstream benefits are huge. A key issue, a very active debate, if you jump to the next slide, is what does that kind of research mean about how we can enrich current practices in early childhood and especially in preschool programming to create these events within our current structure of schools? And I don't know about Canada, but in the US, there's a big debate about whether preschools are getting too academic focused, and they should lay off the academics and spend more time enriching just the quality of warmth and support for social emotional development. This slide, I put in a little graphic of fake news. It's a little American humor. But the point is, it's a false dichotomy that in fact, the best programs understand that cognitive development also underpins social emotional development. And we need to look at practices that treat these things as an integrated whole, rather than thinking of programs that are play-based for social emotional skill and more academically focused. The next slide, the ABCs of social emotional learning, is just to indicate that in fact, cognition and understanding affect, there's a lot of language and a lot of cognitive processing that undergirds social emotional resilience. It is about feeling secure and positive, but it's also about being able to cope with and understand the things that happen to you, manage those strong emotions, and identify and plan problem-solving efforts. So the next slide, how do we get there? What do we know about the practices in preschool that really seem to make a big difference? I'm going to use examples from our particular research, the research-based developmentally informed REDI program, but I'm going to talk about the general principles that it illustrates in terms of optimal practices. So the first slide, the next slide, really indicates something we've known a long time. Jean touched on it. We absolutely need to start with a foundation of positive interpersonal relationships in preschool. We need centers that are characterized by warm teacher-child interactions, by high-quality language use, by positive behavioral supports, no use of punitive consequences. But we've also learned that by itself is not enough. Simply creating a positive experience doesn't provide children with all the resilience skills that we are able to do with some enrichments. So the next slide really focuses on one area of enrichment that we're finding more and more, learning more and more about. And this is enriching programs with a really evidence-based intentional social emotional learning program. This is a program that really provides more instruction, modeling, support for specific social emotional skills. The next slide, I have an example of the program that we use in our program, the Preschool PAS curriculum. This is a little picture, but it basically is a lesson plan that gives teachers stories, puppet shows, activities that touch on understanding emotions, how to use routines to gain self-control, how to make friends, etc. It makes it explicit for children, ideas about how to cope with feelings and get along with others. The next slide just indicates it's a very helpful kind of a platform to teachers to have this sort of lesson plan, because it helps them move in a learning progression in a systematic way to support development. The next slide, what else is important? And it really is integrating a focus on the social emotional learning with the key cognitive skills that are also foundational for later resilience and success, especially language skills. We know that language skills just play such an important role, both in the child's understanding of their own emotion, but also their ability to understand others and get along with others. So in the next slide, I have an example of this in the REDI program, where we've integrated with the PAS curriculum a daily interactive reading program that uses high quality children's literature that follows the same social emotional themes as those presented in PATHs, but allows teachers to really have an interactive conversational experience with children, building language skills along with their social emotional skills. Next slide. What else is important? Important component number 4, partnering with parents. There's just, there's no way we can underestimate the importance of a school to parent to family connection, and how valuable it is to have those two support systems working in alignment to support this early social emotional development. And the next slide, I have an example of how we do that in the REDI program. We have activity boxes and short videos that we send home to parents that give them ideas about what's happening at school and how they can follow through with those ideas at home in the way they play with their child, in the way that they read with their child. So the next slide, summary of these 5 key features. Definitely a solid base and high quality interactions at school, including a explicit social emotional learning program that's evidence-based, blending that program with cognitive skill developmental support, especially for language skills, involving parents effectively. And then the last one to touch on is providing parents with the professional development support they need to really be able to make this programming their own. And what can we expect with this kind of programming? I'm going to quickly share the results of our REDI program that I've been using an example from. The next slide, actually skip the next slide and go to the next one. It's similar data, but just to keep me in time, these are outcomes from children who experienced preschool either with the REDI enrichments or regular preschool. So it's really a test of how much do these research-based enhancements enrich the upstream impact. These are high school teacher ratings. So these teachers in high school, many, many years after the preschool experience, of course, they have no idea who's received the enrichment or not. And you can see these are ratings of the percentage of children that based on teacher ratings have clinically significant levels of mental health issues. You can see in each of these areas, there's a really important significant effect of enriched preschool with, we see it in conduct problems, we see it in emotional symptoms, that's anxiety and depression, hyperactivity, and peer problems. So the key take-home point is we really know how to do this. And with proper investment of funds, we can really strengthen how we're using preschool experiences and reaching out to parents to enrich the kind of skill learning that's going to stay with kids throughout their lives and really support their well-being in the long run. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's always a challenge, isn't it, to put into a few minutes a real lifetime of work. And so we heard from Jean that value of investment, and I think from you a real holistic approach, including children, families, and their communities. And so now I'm going to ask Marie-Claude Roberge to speak to us. And Marie-Claude is a scientific advisor on mental health promotion at the Institut National de Santé Publique du Québec, the INSPQ, as we refer to that organization in Quebec, that it really is a policy organization. And she's worked in the Healthy Schools approach in Quebec. She's been in charge of designing and deploying that program, and she's going to talk to us about that transition to adulthood from adolescence. So over to you, Marie-Claude, and she's going to speak in French, so please use the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. Thank you, Karen, and over to you, Marie-Claude.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce qu'on me voit? Oui? Oui? OK. Donc, bonjour tout le monde. Merci de l'invitation. Et je vais tout de suite commencer ma présentation en essayant de bien... Okay. Donc, je vais m'attarder à la période de la transition vers l'âge adulte. J'ai aucun conflit d'intérêt et quand on parle de santé mentale des jeunes adultes, quand on parle de la santé mentale des tout petits, on comprend facilement que la santé mentale relève du sain développement. On a une vision plus globale. Plus qu'on vieillit, on attribue beaucoup la santé mentale aux problèmes. Et on a tendance, à ce moment-là, à vouloir soutenir les jeunes en offrant un ensemble de services psychosociaux, médicaux, adapter des mesures compensatoires pour accompagner les jeunes. Donc, on est dans une perspective de réduire l'apparition ou l'impact des troubles mentaux. Alors qu'on pourrait, de façon complémentaire, avoir une perspective beaucoup plus globale, comme on en a parlé ce matin, où on cherche à améliorer les conditions qui produisent la santé mentale. Et dans cette perspective, la santé mentale est beaucoup plus que l'absence de maladie. La santé mentale renvoie à notre capacité de fonctionner, de se sentir bien, d'avoir des sentiments positifs face à la vie. Et une telle vision est complémentaire à celle des troubles mentaux où on met plus l'accent sur la symptomatologie. Et avoir une mesure, par exemple, de la santé mentale qui comprend à la fois la santé mentale positive et celle des troubles mentaux, ça nous permet d'avoir une vision beaucoup plus complète de l'état mental des individus. Quand on est dans une perspective de santé mentale positive, on comprend que la santé mentale a un effet protecteur à la fois sur la santé physique, sur l'émergence des troubles mentaux et sur les comportements suicidaires. Dans cette perspective, on voit aussi que la santé mentale n'est pas intrinsèque à l'individu, mais va fluctuer selon les situations rencontrées, les ressources qui sont disponibles pour faire face. Le passage à la vie adulte entraîne un ensemble de défis qui sont relevés de façon très bien pour la majorité des jeunes, mais qui peuvent poser des défis pour la santé mentale, qui peuvent influencer la santé mentale. C'est une période charnière de la vie où plusieurs changements, plusieurs rôles nouveaux, rôles et responsabilités apparaissent. Les jeunes deviennent autonomes, ils acquièrent une plus grande autonomie, c'est-à-dire la capacité d'adopter des règles de conduite, d'en assumer les conséquences. Ils prennent une distance graduellement face à la famille d'origine. Les relations familiales se modifient, mais ce sont des relations qui restent très importantes. L'identité se négocie à travers les relations sociales et amoureuses. Les jeunes sont appelés à maintenir une routine en faveur des saines habitudes de vie, malgré un grand nombre de changements. C'est aussi une période de la vie où ils font plusieurs choix dont la portée est à long terme. Au niveau scolaire, ils ont des choix vocationnels à faire. Pendant qu'ils étudient, ils ont souvent à concilier travail, études, vie personnelle. Ils ont à s'adapter à un nouveau cadre scolaire, l'université, le collège. Ils ont, pour ceux qui ont à apprendre à gérer un budget parfois restreint. C'est aussi une période où certains intègrent le marché d'emploi, où ils ont à composer avec des entrevues d'embauche, s'adapter à un nouveau travail, où ils sont souvent exposés à une faible attitude décisionnelle au travail. Et la capacité d'être en emploi est intimement liée à leur niveau de qualification. C'est une période où ils prennent conscience des enjeux sociaux et où on reconnaît que l'engagement civique facilite la création de réseaux sociaux. Ça contribue au cheminement de l'éducation et de l'emploi, puis ça permet une prise de conscience de la portée collective des enjeux sociaux. Ça facilite le sentiment d'appartenance aussi. Par contre, ce n'est pas à la portée de tous les jeunes. On comprend que c'est une période où les possibilités sont variables selon les contextes. Bien que les jeunes adultes soient appelés individuellement à faire des choix et à prendre des décisions au regard de leur parcours de vie, le déroulement de leur parcours de vie est fortement influencé par les possibilités qu'offrent les structures, les institutions qui les entourent. C'est une période aussi, où le statut social se définit et où on assiste à un transfert des avantages d'une génération à l'autre, ce qui peut contribuer ou ce qui contribue grandement au développement d'inégalités sociales de santé mentale. On sait aussi que la capacité des jeunes à faire face aux situations de la vie, c'est un fort prédicteur de la santé mentale. Donc, c'est important de comprendre cette période, de s'attarder aux situations qui sont vécues, puis aux possibilités aussi offertes à travers les trajectoires et les transitions qui y sont associées. Pardon. Juste un petit mot pour parler du contexte de la COVID pour les jeunes adultes. Alors, plusieurs sondages d'études préliminaires en contexte de COVID nous montrent qu'il y a des impacts psychosociaux pour tout le monde, mais particulièrement pour les jeunes adultes. Ils sont plus anxieux, certains vivent des situations de violence, la consommation d'alcool peut augmenter dans certains cas. On sait aussi que pour les jeunes qui sont entourés, le soutien social est un modérateur des impacts psychosociaux liés à la COVID. Les jeunes vont vivre des expériences variées face à la COVID. Certains vont vivre des deuils, mais d'autres vont être obligés de quitter l'école, de perdre leur emploi. Ce sont les derniers arrivés, ce sont souvent des emplois plus précaires. Pour les étudiants internationaux, la fermeture des résidences va entraîner une perte de logement. Donc, il y a des expériences variées et on n'est pas tous égaux face aux conséquences de la COVID non plus. De grandes inégalités se dessinent. Comment on peut promouvoir la santé mentale dans ce contexte des jeunes adultes? Ça prend un ensemble coordonné d'actions intersectorielles. C'est à travers l'interaction permanente et complexe tout au long de la vie entre les individus, leur milieu de vie et le contexte global que les trajectoires se dessinent, puis que la santé mentale et la santé physique d'ailleurs se construisent. L'amélioration de la santé mentale ne peut se limiter aux services d'aide, de soutien psychologique ou au développement d'habiletés au regard de la santé mentale. Il y a des politiques sociales permettent d'égaliser les chances des jeunes, de les outiller face aux situations de vie et par conséquent pouvoir promouvoir et protéger leur santé mentale. Des politiques, par exemple, de soutien aux familles où les allocations familiales, l'aide financière à la formation débordent 18 ans, les conditions de logement des familles, le soutien aux jeunes parents aussi, les politiques qui appuient la scolarisation, l'insertion en emploi, celles qui favorisent l'inclusion sociale, des politiques qui permettent de lutter contre la stigmatisation, la discrimination, et bien sûr des politiques qui donnent un accès aux services de santé mentale de qualité, des services de santé mentale qui sont orientés vers le bien-être et pas seulement dans une perspective médicale. Ces politiques-là s'incarnent souvent dans les milieux de vie des jeunes, où on comprend que des initiatives coordonnées dans les différents milieux de vie, sensibles aux réalités que vivent les jeunes, permettent de créer des environnements physiques, sociaux, économiques et culturels qui sont favorables à leur épanouissement, à leur réussite et à leur engagement. On pense par exemple à des opportunités dans les communautés, ou des opportunités d'engagement, de renforcer les liens sociaux qui encouragent la participation des jeunes. On pense aussi à des politiques scolaires qui encouragent le développement global des étudiants dans les établissements postsecondaires, par exemple. À cet égard, on pense le retour à l'école. J'ai vu en en suivant la littérature, qu'on se préoccupe énormément d'avoir des services de santé mentale en place, mais on comprend aussi, plusieurs travaux montrent que ce n'est pas suffisant, que quand on est dans un environnement qui est promoteur de santé, qui est promoteur d'un environnement sans discrimination, sans violence, par exemple, ça vient où on a des services en santé mentale, mais on a une vision beaucoup plus globale qui est beaucoup plus porteuse pour assurer une bonne santé mentale des jeunes. On veut aussi des politiques ou des communautés qui valorisent l'engagement parental. Les jeunes adultes prennent des distances face à leur famille, mais les parents sont encore importants. On veut aussi des lois qui protègent les jeunes travailleurs. Au niveau individuel, ça prend dans un esprit d'action intersectorielle coordonnée. On veut des services qui sont destinés aux jeunes, mais on comprend que le développement des compétences socio-émotionnelles, qui vient d'être discuté plus tôt dans la présentation précédente, qui est crucial, ce développement-là pour les jeunes, reste très pertinent pour les jeunes adultes. Et on veut des programmes qui poursuivent ce développement des compétences socio-émotionnelles avec des situations réalistes, des possibilités de pratique de rétroaction et que ces interventions-là qui visent les individus soient jumelées à des interventions au niveau des milieux de vie. Voilà, j'ai essayé de faire vite, j'ai coupé un peu, mais en somme, l'amélioration de la santé mentale des jeunes adultes relève d'un ensemble coordonné d'actions qui visent tous les jeunes en considérant leurs besoins variés et leurs divers contextes. Ces actions doivent permettre l'amélioration des conditions de vie, la mise en place de normes, de règles qui favorisent la réduction des inégalités sociales de santé mentale, l'accès à des ressources et des services dans les milieux de vie, ainsi que leur participation. Ces actions ne seront possibles que par une collaboration accrue entre tous les acteurs de santé publique et ceux de d'autres secteurs. En gros, on veut reconnaître que les jeunes adultes ont des enjeux distincts, qui est important d'adopter, je pense qu'on en a parlé depuis ce matin, une conception holistique des jeunes qui permet de considérer l'ensemble de leurs besoins. On veut favoriser leur participation, c'est une condition de succès, et privilégier des approches qui sont globales, intégrées. C'est les plus prometteuses. Voilà, merci beaucoup. Ces informations-là sont consignées dans deux rapports, un rapport qui est traduit en français et en anglais. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claude, for that incredible presentation in a very, very short period of time. So Patsy, I'm just going to ask a question. My thought was that we would get sort of one concluding remark from each speaker. Do we have time for that? There's a couple of questions in the chat box, but I think those could be maybe asked offline, or answered, I'm sorry, offline. So Patsy, can I just take maybe 4 more minutes? So I'm just going to put the two things together here because this morning we heard that incredibly powerful presentation from Albert Marshall and the summary from Dr. Brenda Restuhl. I'm just going to read the definition of two-eyed seeing again, and because I think we've sort of have these two sets of evidence and knowledge sort of beside each other. So two-eyed seeing refers to learning to see from one eye with the strengths of indigenous knowledges and ways of knowing, and from the other eye with the strengths of Western knowledges and ways of knowing, and learning to use both these eyes together for the benefit of all. And I'm actually going to ask you, each of you, for your one best piece of advice to this audience today, at this moment, in this time, to be able to find and use that evidence and those knowledges for upstream policies that promote mental health. And I'm going to start with Karen, move to Marie-Claude, and give Jean the final word. So Karen, one piece of advice that blends and moves
I
us
think
ahead.
this panel has really highlighted the importance of a perspective that looks at developmental periods comprehensively, but understands the unique importance of each developmental period. So we have a developmentally tailored, holistic approach.
Thank you. Well done. Marie-Claude, over to you.
Oui, le 2I Seeing nous montre que insiste beaucoup sur la perspective holistique. Le côté autochtone nous parle de la perspective holistique. Le côté non autochtone, on a une tendance à, en s'inspirant de cette perspective holistique, on a quand même une tendance à mettre ou à produire des preuves, des évidences de façon compartimentée. Quand j'ai fait cette revue de littérature-là pour arriver au rapport qui découle de la présentation, c'était assez clair que la santé mentale des jeunes adultes était influencée par la violence, par la consommation d'alcool, par un ensemble d'éléments qui, quand on regardait ces littératures spécifiques, il y avait des preuves, mais on n'abordait pas la santé mentale. Donc, on n'a pas une vision dans nos politiques, ou pas juste dans nos politiques, dans notre façon de faire la recherche, on n'intègre pas bien cette perspective globale et intégrée. Moi, je pense que c'est une des premières choses qu'on a à apprendre. Voilà.
Thank you, Marie-Claude. That's an excellent piece of advice. And then finally to you, Dr. Clinton, for your advice to this audience today.
You know, there's so many things going through my head, Claire. You know, the idea that two-eyed seeing is about collaboration and co-learning means to me that we need to get our arrogance and our hierarchical systems out of the way. To be, as Dr. Rastool said, to be looking at the tree and what happens, what is underneath the behavior, what's underneath the symptoms, what is underneath, I think tells us that our medical model, and I'm speaking as a doctor, our medical model is not adequate for the needs of well-being. That I think we've heard from all three of the speakers as well, that we need to be focusing on the promotion of holistic well-being as a primary focus. You know, we've spent lots and lots of money and years on mental health intervention, but we're not getting the results we need. So we need to be very much shifting, as this conference is about upstream, trying to figure out holistically, collaboratively, and learning together from families what works, what will help you, promoting well-being, I think is something that really has sung through for me.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jean. And I think one of the things that Albert Marshall said is we need to humble ourselves, which is what I hear, you know, in getting rid of that arrogance. The way to do that is to humble ourselves, to be very humble in our, as he called it, our journey forward in collaboration and co-learning. So thank you so much to all three of you for bringing your wisdom, your knowledge, your evidence to our space and our room here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Patsy or Wendy to help us to move through today. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you once again, folks. I mean, this is about, a lot of it is transforming our way of thinking, our way of talking. And when we listened to what Trish had to say last night, that's one of the first groundswells of change that need to happen in order for us to change public understanding of what we need to do in order to create us all as mentally healthy people and a healthier society. So we've got a lot of opportunity for change here in the dialogue that we're having. And very soon we're going to be moving to roundtables, small groups where there's an opportunity to really hash some of these things out. You were sent questions this morning through the email, and those questions are the ones that you will be debating, and I'm sure you'll also head in other directions, but there's an idea that out of this whole forum will come a policy brief. So you all have opportunities to contribute to that, and that's what will happen in the roundtables. So the other thing I just wanted to say is that all of the PowerPoint presentations have been created in PDF, and they are on the speaker profiles as handouts, so you can get them there. Most of them have been translated already, and if they're not translated yet, they will be. So you can get them in French and English in PDF, and they're available in the Whova conference platform with the speaker profiles. So the questions have been sent. I think we're a little bit behind in time, but so valuable, and I really appreciate all the contributions this morning. So we'll take a 10-minute break, come back at 11, I'm sorry. Come back at 11, and we'll have time for the roundtables. We'll shorten lunch. I think, can we handle a half-hour lunch rather than an hour? Or would that work for everybody? You okay? So I think we'll give the roundtables a good chance, because that's your opportunity to really dialogue. Come back in 10 minutes and we'll start the roundtables and give roundtables an hour, break at 12. And the political panel starts at 12:30. So it's a tight schedule, but your day is shorter because it is online. So please go stretch and have a little bit of a break, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.